It was my 29th birthday, and I woke up with that familiar flutter of anticipation in my chest. Birthdays had always been bittersweet in my family. My mother would fuss over trivial things, my brother would lazily ignore me until it suited him, and Grandpa had always been the one who made me feel seen. I hadn't expected much this year, just a quiet morning. Maybe a cake with too many candles and a card with his shaky handwriting. When I walked into the living room, the sunlight streaming through the curtains caught the dust in the air, and there he was. Grandpa was sitting in his old leather armchair, his hands folded neatly in his lap, a small envelope resting on the table in front of him. His eyes, bright and full of warmth, met mine, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't in years, love that was entirely mine, without conditions, without judgment. "Happy birthday, my dear," he said softly, his voice trembling a little. "This is for you." I approached, curiosity bubbling like a spark in my chest. My hand shook as I took the envelope, feeling its weight. When I opened it, my breath caught. A check. A $500,000 check. Just for me. My hands trembled as I stared at the numbers, at the signature that bore Grandpa's steady hand, at the realization that he trusted me enough to leave me something so significant. It wasn't just money. It was recognition, validation, and a kind of love I had always craved from my family. Before I could even fully process it, my mother appeared at the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes hard and calculating. "Give it to your brother. Now!" she ordered, her voice sharp enough to make the blood in my veins turn cold. Shock froze me. My mother had always had a way of controlling the narrative in our house, but this was different. This was more than her usual favoritism toward my brother. This was theft, thinly veiled as maternal authority. "Mom, it's Grandpa's gift," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's meant for me." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, blocking my way. "I said give it to him. You don't need it. You'll ruin yourself if you take it. He needs it more." Her words were venom wrapped in false concern, and in that moment, all the years of being overlooked, of being second best, of being dismissed, came rushing back. I realized that I wasn't just angry at the command. I was hurt, humiliated, and betrayed by the people I should have been able to trust the most. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had always been stubborn, always determined to carve my own path, even if it meant standing alone. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, the check clutched tightly to my chest. The room felt smaller than ever, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were conspiring to keep me trapped. But with every heartbeat, a plan began to form. I wouldn't let them take what was mine. I wouldn't let their jealousy and greed define my life. I thought about Grandpa's smile, about the quiet pride in his eyes, about the trust he had placed in me. That trust was my armor, and it gave me the courage to do what I had never done before: defy my mother and escape. I realized that this wasn't just about money, it was about claiming my independence, my dignity, and finally proving to myself that I mattered. By the time the house was silent, I had made my decision. I would leave tonight. I would step into the night with nothing but the essentials and the check, and I would go to the one place that could protect me, the bank. The thought sent a shiver of fear through me, but beneath it was something stronger: determination. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to my family's control. I was choosing my own destiny, and I knew, deep down, that the moment I walked out that door, everything would change. The house was deathly quiet when I finally slipped from my room. Every creak of the floorboards under my bare feet made my heart jump, but I forced myself to move as silently as possible. The check was tucked safely in my wallet, pressed against my chest like a talisman. I felt as though every step I took was both liberation and defiance, a rebellion against the family that had tried to steal from me, against the mother who had always made me feel small, against a past that I was finally ready to leave behind. The hallway seemed longer than ever, shadows twisting around corners like silent witnesses to my escape. I paused outside my mother's room, holding my breath, imagining her sharp eyes snapping open, her voice commanding me to stop. But the house remained still, almost holding its breath with me, as though it knew the storm that was about to be unleashed. The front door loomed ahead, both inviting and terrifying. One push, one step into the night, and there would be no turning back. Outside, the world was cool and liberating. The night air hit my face like a slap of reality, waking me to the fact that I was no longer a child to be cajoled or manipulated. Streetlights glimmered along the pavement, and the distant hum of the city was a reminder that life went on, indifferent to the petty betrayals of my family. I hailed a cab with trembling hands, whispering the address of my bank like a secret prayer. The driver didn't ask questions, just drove, and I watched the city blur past, feeling a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. When I arrived at the bank, the building seemed both familiar and foreign. I had come here countless times with my mother and brother, always as the obedient daughter, the invisible one. But now, I was no one's shadow. I approached the counter, head held high, heart pounding, and placed the check on the polished surface. I was ready to claim what was mine, ready to finally prove that I could stand on my own. The manager looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something I had never expected: fear. His face went pale, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the phone. "Ma'am, call the police," he said, voice tight and unsteady. Confusion sliced through me like ice. "Why? What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely hiding the rising panic. He avoided my gaze, glancing at the check, then back at me. "Your mother, she reported this check stolen. She says you're trying to take it illegally." The words hit me like a physical blow. My stomach churned and anger flared hotter than I expected. They had tried to trap me, to make me look like a thief, when all I had done was claim a gift that was rightfully mine. I gritted my teeth, feeling the betrayal deepen, but beneath the hurt was a spark of resolve. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. I realized in that moment that I had two choices: panic, cry, or submit, letting them dictate my life again, or rise, fight, and take control. I took a deep breath, letting the fear settle into cold determination. This was the first test of my independence, and I would not fail. I knew that somewhere Grandpa's eyes would be watching me, proud and expectant, trusting me to do what was right. With a careful smile, I stepped back, tucking the check securely into my bag. The city outside the bank lights seemed to whisper possibilities: freedom, revenge, and the life I was finally ready to claim. This was only the beginning, and I could already feel the tide turning in my favor. The night was mine now, and no one could stop me from walking into it. I disappeared from the life that had tried to suffocate me, stepping into a world that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first weeks were the hardest. Every phone call from home, every message left unanswered, felt like a tiny echo of the betrayal I had endured. But with every step I took away from my mother's controlling grasp, I felt a sense of liberation I had never known. I rented a small apartment under a new name, a place that felt like mine in every sense, where no one could reach me without my permission. The city, vast and indifferent, became my ally. The check safely tucked in my hidden account was more than money. It was a key to freedom. I started small, investing cautiously, learning about business, finance, and the kind of independence I had always dreamed of but never dared to pursue. Every successful transaction, every careful investment, was a quiet rebellion against the life I had been forced into. I was building not just wealth, but a life that was truly mine, piece by piece. Months passed, and I changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. My confidence grew, not from arrogance, but from the quiet satisfaction of knowing I could survive and thrive without anyone's approval. I enrolled in evening courses, met people who inspired me, and slowly transformed from the overlooked daughter into someone who commanded attention without even trying. My mother's warnings, her constant comparisons to my brother, faded into distant memories, replaced by the quiet hum of possibility and accomplishment. Then came the opportunity I had been waiting for, a charity gala, an event my mother and brother attended every year, flaunting their connections and social status. They never noticed me, never thought to invite me, because in their eyes I had no place in that world. But now, everything had changed. I had cultivated relationships, supported causes, and quietly earned recognition in circles they couldn't imagine. I received my invitation weeks in advance, not as an afterthought, but as a guest of honor. Walking into the grand hall, I felt a mixture of thrill and satisfaction. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting delicate light on the elegantly dressed guests. My mother and brother were there, talking and laughing, completely unaware that I had arrived. The moment their eyes met mine, I saw it. A flicker of recognition, followed by disbelief. They had expected nothing, and yet here I was, radiant and composed, the very embodiment of success they had never imagined I could achieve. I didn't need to confront them. I let the whispers spread naturally through the room, the subtle shock on their faces enough to reveal their disbelief and fear. "Isn't that her?" one of their acquaintances murmured, and I smiled politely, letting them realize that the daughter they had underestimated was no longer theirs to control. For the first time, I understood the power of quiet revenge. I hadn't ruined them publicly, I hadn't humiliated them with words. Instead, I had built a life that shone brighter than anything they could take from me. Their betrayal had fueled me, but their ignorance of my transformation made the victory all the sweeter. I walked among the guests, receiving congratulations and warm smiles, every moment a reminder that I was finally living on my own terms. That night, as the gala ended and the city lights glittered beneath the windows, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The life I had carved out for myself, born from courage and perseverance, was a testament to my resilience. The check from Grandpa had been the spark, but my determination had turned it into a fire that no one could extinguish. And as I stepped into the cool night air afterward, I knew that my journey was far from over. But for the first time, it was truly mine. The days after the gala were surreal. For the first time in years, I felt untethered from the shadows of my past. My mother and brother had no idea where I had gone, no idea how much I had grown, and I relished the quiet thrill of their ignorance. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want revenge through humiliation, but I wanted the satisfaction of knowing that their attempts to control me had failed completely. Every small success I celebrated felt like a private victory, a way of proving to myself that I was more than their expectations, more than their resentment, more than the sum of the betrayal they had forced upon me. I called Grandpa one evening, just to hear his voice, and the warmth that filled the line reminded me of why I had fought so hard. He listened patiently as I recounted the steps I had taken, the small triumphs, the milestones, and the quiet power of independence. His laughter, gentle and approving, made me feel whole in a way that had nothing to do with money or recognition. It was love, pure and unwavering, that reminded me what truly mattered. Eventually, my mother did call, her voice hesitant, a stark contrast to the sharp commands I had grown up with. I'm sorry," she said. There was no theatrics, no entitlement, just a fragile attempt at reconciliation. I listened, and I smiled, not because I forgave her, not yet, but because I had nothing to prove to her anymore. My happiness, my strength, my independence, all of it was mine. I didn't need her approval to feel worthy. I didn't need her validation to feel proud. I began to allow myself to enjoy life in ways I had never permitted before. I decorated my apartment exactly as I wanted, with books, art, and plants that brought me peace. I traveled to places I had dreamed of visiting but had never dared to because my mother had always deemed them frivolous. I invested in passions I had ignored, and every decision I made reinforced the sense of ownership I now had over my own existence. The world had opened itself to me in ways I had only imagined in stolen daydreams, and the weight of betrayal that had once threatened to crush me was replaced by a lightness I had never known. In time, the calls from my family became less frequent. I didn't mind. Distance, I realized, was part of my healing. The life I had built was a testament to my courage, my resilience, and my refusal to be defined by the people who had tried to hold me back. I had turned the betrayal into fuel, the fear into determination, and the anger into action. One evening, I found myself holding the photograph Grandpa had given me on my 29th birthday, the same day the check had been placed in my hands. In it, his smile was warm and proud, his eyes full of trust. I traced the lines of his face with my finger, and for a moment, I allowed myself to cry. Not for what had been stolen from me, but for what I had finally reclaimed: my sense of self, my dignity, and my freedom. I placed the photograph on my desk, where the sunlight from the window caught it just right, and I whispered quietly to myself, I am free. For the first time, it wasn't just words, it was a truth I could feel in my bones. I had survived betrayal, outsmarted manipulation, and risen above a world that had tried to cage me. The life that stretched before me was wide open, full of possibilities I had only just begun to explore. And in that freedom, I understood the ultimate revenge. Not confrontation, not cruelty, not retribution, but thriving, unapologetically, in a world that could no longer control me. I had turned pain into power, betrayal into wisdom, and fear into courage. I had become the person I was always meant to be, and that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.